Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me and Mayor Ed Gainey as we take a deeper look at some of the important topics you want to know more about ahead of the mayoral primary here in Pittsburgh that's happening on May 20th. So early voting is just starting, and I will also be interviewing Allegheny County Controller Corey O'Connor, who is challenging Mayor Gainey. So stay tuned for that. But first, Mayor Gainey, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me today.
Absolutely. So I have three topics I want to hit on. I want to talk about housing, I want to talk about policing, and I want to talk about race. So the
Mm.
first question I have for you is when it comes to affordable housing, we hear that word a lot, but what does it actually mean?
Yeah, affordable housing for me is one that has to be safe, one that has to be decent, the other that has to be affordable.
Mhm.
The other part of affordable housing that we've heard a lot about is the inclusionary zoning part that we're trying to get through right now as part of our overall zoning
Mhm.
change. And the reason why that's important is that what we're asking for is that for every 20 units that's built in this city, let us have 10% that is affordable
Mhm.
at 50% of the area median income.
Okay.
What that means just humanizing it is that a mother that got two kids that's a social worker can be able to live in any new development over 20 units or more throughout the city. The reason why that is important is because through the years, we've always had housing segregation, the haves over here, the have nots over here. And
Mhm.
if we're going to have a city that's truly for all, we need housing integration. And if we're going to use taxpayer dollars to be able to finance some of the housing gaps that they have, then at the same time, we should be able to build a city for everybody. And
Mhm.
that's what affordable housing is, the ability to make sure that we have affordable housing throughout this city. We built 8 years of market rate housing, and
Mhm.
we lost 3,000 low income working families. We lost 700 Black homeowners, 15,000 left the city. That's just too much. In order for us to be successful, we have to have affordable housing. Even when I'm downtown and I'm talking to the young professionals, if they got a choice between paying eight or $900 a month in the suburbs compared to 1,500 for one bedroom downtown, they're going to pay 800 and not $800 to $900 in the suburbs. It just makes sense. They want affordable housing.
Absolutely. So when we're talking about building these units for people that may not know, where exactly can we find these new units that you've been discussing and how you've talked about they've been built?
So to give people the ability to be able to follow it. We created a tractor. When you go on the tractor, you can see throughout the city what we've done.
Mhm. Oh, okay. So where are some of the neighborhoods where people can find these homes, these
So
units?
you can look in Lawrenceville. You can also
Mhm.
look in Oakland. You can look in the Hill District, Allentown. We just finished up in Allentown, and there's some others on the tracker as well.
When we talk about Pittsburgh, we continue to lose population here. So let's talk about that. Why do you think people are choosing not to stay? How do we keep them? And what can we do as both a community, but also in your position as mayor to encourage businesses and families to put roots down? Because I sometimes feel it's like the chicken and the egg. It's like we need the housing, but we
Right,
also need the businesses, but we need the businesses, but we need
right.
the housing. So how do we figure this out?
So I think one is, you got to go back to housing because think of how many people moved out the city and moved into the suburbs. We
Mhm.
lost a great deal of people. Over 15,000 left this region. So
Mhm.
one, you have to stabilize the city through housing, and two, we have to be much more intentional in bringing immigration into our city. We need immigration. We need immigration desperately.
Mhm.
That's why we created, when I first got elected, we created it was the first international festival parade where ethnic groups from all over that live here now, they had an opportunity to march through downtown. We tried a lot of different foods, a lot of different ethnic foods, because I believe you got to be seen in order for people to believe that they see your culture in your
Mhm.
city. And one of the things that we want to do is continue to highlight those culture. That's why we have the immigration office, or Office of Immigration. So even when they were going through the situation with President Trump of not being able to get their paperwork done, we made sure we
Mhm.
sent people out to help them with their paperwork. We just continue to invest because we are a nation of immigrants. And in order for the population to grow, we have to remain a city of immigrants.
Let's talk a little bit about police. This is a very diverse city. You just spoke to all of the different immigrant groups that live here. We have a lot of different racial and ethnic groups that live here, and they live within a lot of different communities, and they all have different needs. And from what I hear, is that some communities are really looking for safety. They want more police presence in their neighborhoods, but other communities often feel as though they're under-resourced and over-policed. So
Correct.
how do you balance this?
I think you balance it through community policing, and that's what we've done. So we've reduced homicides in the city by 33%.
Mhm.
When I came in the first year I came in the office, we had 71 homicides. And I always said one homicide is too many, but 71 is a lot.
Yeah.
And so we've reduced that to 42 homicides last year. 33% reduction in homicide. Last year, the ages 13 and 17, we didn't have one homicide in this city. And that's amazing when we're talking about our youth. But community policing is the way to go about it. We didn't over police in any black and brown neighborhoods. So when they say that you need more policing in order to stop crime, it's just not true. What you need is trust and relationship. You have to build relationship with community, neighborhood, and merchants inside those neighborhoods so that the trust is established. Without trust, you don't have nothing. To be able to say we reduce homicides by 33% is amazing. You take neighborhoods like Homewood that has excellent people in it, but people have only seen a negative, only 2 homicides last year, 2 or 3 homicides last year in that community. It's about building the trust. How did we do it? We came in, first time in over 20 years, we gave the police the police a contract with a pay raise in it, where they didn't have to go to arbitration. We negotiated through the collective bargaining agreement. We got a disciplinary matrix in saying that if you do this, here's the discipline. So not only did they get a pay raise, but we were also able to put a discipline matrix in there to say, hey, this is no longer subjective, it's objective. Mm-hmm. And here's what we're trying to reach. Secondly, I think that you have to continue to keep our rec centers open longer. We started to do that because I believe that if you keep children in structured activity, they'll live structured life. And that also helps the police because now you can go by those rec centers. You can say hello to the community. You can begin to change the image of how children see police. The more we change that image and they see us as partners, they see us as trusted value police officers in our community, the more tips we get, the more information we get, and we start making policing look attractive again. Mm-hmm. So it's really that relationship between police and community that makes the ultimate difference when you talk about policing.
When it comes to not having a police chief currently, I've heard you speak to the constituents and about their concerns on this. But what are you hearing from the police here in Pittsburgh and how they feel about a lack of leadership? Is it impacting how they're able to do their jobs? And what is the solution for this?
I have been, when I talk to the police, so I go around every zone. I go to zone 1 through zone 6. I go to major crimes to talk to the police. And they'll tell you that most of them will tell you I'm the first mayor to ever go around each zone and major crimes and have conversation. I haven't heard anything negative about that. They're happy with Chief Divine. Matter of fact, they like Chief Divine. I don't know if Chief Divine wants it permanently, but they like him. And even when I'm out in these communities, no one asks me who the chief of police is. What they do ask me is how I'm gonna keep their neighborhood safe, how I'm gonna keep them safe and their children safe. That's the crux of it. And that's why I'm always talking about community policing. Now, I did believe in Ragland. I thought Ragland would be a great police chief. But shenanigans that happen on city council, it is what it is at that moment.
Okay, so when we look at something like what happened recently at P-Town and the bar in Bloomfield, and we had a lot of officers showing up in vests for a compliance check, many in the LGBTQ community that I talked to and that I saw online as well, they were writing and they were expressing to me that they really felt traumatized by this experience. So what do you want people to understand who have often not had good experiences with police in the past? And do you think this would have happened had we had a permanent police chief, or what do those values have to look like in order for this kind of thing not to happen in the future?
So one, I don't want no one to be traumatized because I understand what that feels like. I'm coming from Larimer Avenue. There's no question that I get it. And I would never want, nobody in the LGBTQIA, no one period, to be traumatized by police presence. And that is something that we're holding under review now to make sure that there's no targeting, because I don't believe in targeting anybody. And if there is, there will be, the situation will be rectified. But this was the fire. It was overpopulated in there. Someone called. So they went to check it out. But did you have to go with that much force? Right. That's what's under investigation right now. So before I make any statement on that, I would rather wait until it's investigated. But let me be clear. The first thing I want to do is make sure there's no targeting. There's no need to target nobody. Nobody. I don't care what you do. There's no reason to target anybody. I understand what that feels like. And so the first thing we're going to eliminate is if there was targeting, we will deal with it. And then secondly, I don't want nobody to live in trauma. One thing that we've been creating is a safe city, a city where nobody has to feel like they need to live in trauma, and we will continue to do that.
So I want to hit home on this a little bit more as we wrap this up, and I thank you for your time. You and Allegheny County Controller Corey O'Connor, who's running against you in this primary, you have very different lived experiences. And so when I hear you both speak to your constituents, it's clear that sometimes you're talking about different communities and different priorities because of those lived experiences. So from your perspective, Mayor Gainey, how do we create a Pittsburgh for all when there is still very clearly a racial divide in the city, and historically certain communities have felt left out of this experience of new Pittsburgh?
Yeah. I think there's a couple of things. I'm going to name three. One is I'm going to go back, I'm going to go back to housing. It's important. If we don't have housing integration, we're going to continue to have housing segregation. And so the 10% of housing that can help integrate communities is extremely important. It's extremely important. When I came in, we hadn't moved one parcel out of the land bank. Now we moved over 160 units out of the land bank. We funded own PGH where 150 renters now became homeowners, and 80% was minority women, which is another way of, one, generating wealth, and two, integrating neighborhoods. And then thirdly is, employment and contracting. We came in, we did our procurement modernization initiative because we believe that there's no way that 80, 90% of the contracts was just going to one race. We wanted to make sure that everybody had an opportunity to be able to participate in going for bids for contract with the city. As of now, for the first time in the history of the city, we got 3 African-American primes on major construction jobs. We got Frederick Douglass over in Homewood on Homewood Field. We got Waller on the new Department of Public Works project. And we got Latrenda doing our comprehensive plan. 54% of our MBEs are now going to minorities. 50% of subcontractors are going to minorities. 1% of subcontractors is LGBTQIA. You have to continue to make sure that your administration is diverse. You have to make sure that your contracts are giving opportunities to everybody. The third thing we have to do is we have to stop segregating our communities. We have to stop saying that, I can go by zip code to know who you are. And that's going to come from housing. That's going to come from more immigration. And that's going to come from employment and contracts that we give people the opportunity to be able to say the system is fair. Most people, people say, one of the questions I'm often asked is, where did Black wealth go? Well, Black wealth left here because they couldn't make it. They wouldn't have left. They left here because they couldn't make it here. And so we have to continue to be steadfast in how we make sure that everybody has an opportunity to be able to thrive right here in our city.
Closing thoughts, just as we wrap this up, and I thank you so much for your time. Why are you the right person to continue to lead Pittsburgh in this moment?
My lived experience helped me to create a city for all. It helps me to create a city where I understand the need for affordable housing and why affordable housing is so important, and how housing integration creates a community where everybody feels welcome. Secondly, we have to continue to drive down the homicide rate. If we drive down the homicide rate, that means our children are taken care of, our communities are safe, and that's the number one driving force when you talk about a city feeling safe and knowing that we can remain safe, is driving down homicides. We must continue with the rest of the crime as well, but mainly homicides. And then thirdly, we have to create a city where everybody feels they can thrive, that they don't have to leave here in order to feel that they can make it. They can make it right here in our city. And so that's why I'm the candidate, and I'm asking for your vote on May 20th, because a vote for me continues to build a city for all. You heard me talk about our procurement package and the way that we've been able to diversify it. We got the most diversified administration in the history of the city. At the end of the day, we are all Americans. And the more we can create a path to immigration right here in our city where people want to be, the more we will grow our population and the more people will want to stay here. And that's the bottom line and why I'm asking you to vote for me. My lived experience makes me the right candidate for the job.